Welcome to another exciting episode of Peak First Anxiety. My guest today is a psychotherapist, counselor, lecturer, writer, and a former British Army soldier who sits at the intersection of psychology, philosophy, and human transformation. Please welcome in Liam Wakefield. Liam, welcome.
Thank you. Hi. It's good to speak to you.
So, Liam, why don't you tell everybody a little more about yourself?
So yeah, I guess a good place to start is really what sent me on the journey that I'm on today, really, and that was I got medically retired from the British Army after 11 years of service, and it was a career for me that I was going to hopefully do a full 24 years, as you can do in the British Army. But 11 years in, I got diagnosed with a very rare genetic condition, and I was told I was losing my eyesight, as well as a number of other problems within the body that's got really brought myself and who I thought I was completely into pieces and just shattered everything. And really from that, I kind of went through this big transformational process over about a 2-year period of breaking right down and then trying to rebuild through that. And I found, obviously, through a lot of my own therapy that I was receiving at the time, a real love for the human condition. It sent me on a journey, and I sort of connected with a lot of old friends, ones that I was in Afghanistan with earlier on in my career, and found out that I'd lost quite a few friends as well along the way due to PTSD. So I focused a lot of my work and attention around trauma. Yeah, what happened from there is I jumped around from a few different places. I was out in the States in North Carolina for a little while, doing some suicide prevention. Came back and I was with the NHS, and a little bit after that, I started lecturing at college, teaching counselling and psychotherapy before opening my own private practice. And that's really, for me, brings us to this point here where it's now about really kind of distinguishing and defining my interpretation of what's going on within the human condition and how best to help it and work with it. And when I work with individuals, I do it from a level of having understood a real place of discomfort personally within my own life and a real understanding of how hard things can get and the suffering of the human condition, but also the flip side to that and how amazing it can be as well.
Yeah, do you find that easier to connect with people though, because you're giving you what you've gone through? You tell them a little bit about what you've been through. Do you find it easier to connect to people on that level though?
I do, yeah. And I think for me, and I know within therapeutic practices, self-disclosure is normally something that's kind of kept back and really pared back. It's supposed to be about the patient, of course. And I think what I've found within my own practice is a lot of people have sought me out and wanted to work with me because there is, I do have a public profile and spoken quite a lot openly about my experiences. And I think there's a congruence to that in which people really do relate to, and whether it's a long-term health condition, whether it is trauma-related experiences, or whether it's childhood adversity, which I'd experienced a fair amount of as well. And I
Yeah.
think there is something within there where it does connect with a lot of people, and the people I do work with, we connect on a very deep level. And I think that is where a lot of this work has to be done, especially my work particularly.
Yeah. No, I love it though. I think it's great. I think the authenticity is what really gets to people though, because a lot of people seek me out for the same thing. They're like, well, I like the fact you're just real and honest about it. And I like the fact you're just like, well, I guess therapy tells me not to be honest, but at this point it's working. I mean, why change something that's working? People are literally seeking you out. You're not having to find a lot of people. They're coming to look for you, man. So clearly you're making waves there, just doing your own thing, which is great though. So how did you come to the theory that you're at now? I know you have a different thought process on how things work.
Yeah, it's a good question because, again, as anyone who's spent any time online, there is a plethora of self-help and self exploration sort of directions you can go in and different ways you can understand yourself and different modalities of therapy and different
Yeah.
thought schools that you can really get behind, and all of them have a place. All of them have a deep and rich tapestry in which you can really start to read into and find something within yourself within that. I think for me personally, and I guess this comes from more of the creative perspective, I grew up writing and making music and connecting really deeply with the poetic language and really connecting with understanding myself through poetic language and songs and books. And
Yeah, the philosophy part comes in pretty deep right there. You can tell
yeah,
right there.
yeah, absolutely. And I think it was through that I wanted to utilize that within my own practice instead of having this real pathologized, scientific based evidence process, well, which the NHS used beautifully. And obviously, having been with the NHS, I just found it quite stifling after a while when I have connected more with people by using an analogy about something that they've experienced as opposed to the real neat, clean cut, scientific, exact on paper definition. And sometimes that works. It has its place. It's great. But I think with the people I work with, it tends to be on a level that is far deeper, and it needs a little bit more of what I'd call a mythopoetic explanation. And, if you take a book like The Odyssey and you look at
Mhm.
Odysseus' journey home, that as a metaphor for someone's struggle to return, and it works so profoundly. And when you bring these things into the explanation of somebody and for them to understand themselves, because something that's key to remember here is when a patient comes in and they sit down, for a lot of people, they don't have the lexicon, they don't have the language behind them, how to understand themselves. You're not taught that.
Yeah.
Oftentimes growing up, you're told how you're feeling by a parent or a parental figure to say, "Oh, you're just sad. Come on, you're fine. You're okay. Oh, you're just hurt. This is
Yeah.
this." And
Yeah.
they give you your definitions and they stick. And you get older and you just assign it to that. You think, well, I'm just this. When in actual fact, that might not be the case. Maybe if you peel away some of the layers, you recognize that actually you're not just angry, you're holding a lot of shame around something, or there's a lot of mixed feelings towards something that's getting really sort of condensed into one umbrella emotion. And by using allegories, parables, and tales, and myths, and stories, which with such rich tapestry, they have a great way of connecting somebody to the language in which helps them define themselves. And I think this is why we connect to films. This is why we connect to songs.
Mhm.
This is
Mhm.
connect to things on such a level, but we often don't know why. If it resonates, it resonates at a depth. It tends to be a lot of the language I use within my practice. And how I got there was by being that sort of creative person. And then having gone through what I went through, combining that with the therapeutic training and practices I'd gone through, and just recognizing that people needed a different approach when it came to understanding themselves.
Yeah, 100% agree though. These days, the approach of how you go about it and how you apply it is different to people. Like music really resonates with a lot more people nowadays, even art and poetry and things like that. God, there's a guest I had, we spoke about music for an hour and he was amazed by the depth of things. I was like, yeah, man, I love music. So music hits with me. Even the Odyssey, I think it's a great comparison though, that somebody just going through it. It's like, for anybody that doesn't understand what it's like to go through these things, I think that's probably the best comparison. Just go read that book or even read the synopsis of the book and just kind of skim through it and see that the different things what he's going through the whole time is what a lot of people go through, and people can't explain that to you in words, and when they do, sometimes people don't want to hear what they have to say, or it's too scary for them, depending on what they start telling them, because they don't know how to react, and we haven't trained these people how to react better, and things like that too. So I like the approach of trying to put it in words people can understand, because movies relate to a lot of people too. Everybody's seen, Beautiful Mind and a few of these other ones that are,
Yeah.
all like mental health related ones. Even Split was a really good analysis of, someone with DID almost. It's almost identical to what someone would deal with in those situations. And I think it's great, but at the same time, I think some people need to be able to tell the difference. But with the internet, my only problem is there's too many people out there giving too much information, not enough credibility checks of like what it is you're telling me. There's a guy that tried to convince people that you're not depressed. It's just I forgot what he said, something else, and I'm like, stop telling people that.
Mhm.
Like these are the things that are the problems. Like, okay, cool, you can have your opinion, but make sure you base this and say this is my personal opinion. Don't go just start spouting these things so people think these are real, because people need to understand that you have no training, you have no background in this, you don't understand. You're speaking from what your own personal thoughts are. And which I could respect someone who has an opinion, but other than that, like please stop putting it out as that's factual information, because people are getting the wrong message. Like the whole chat GPT's my therapist thing. No,
Mhm.
let's not do that. AI is not capable of handling those things because they don't have the human emotion that most therapists do. It's great for certain aspects of it. Like I've met a hypnotherapist who's using it to like help people with, certain things, but she's not relying on it. She's like, okay, well, hey, you got 5 minutes, I can give you something to help you right now, kind of thing like that, and she's not relying completely on it because she does understand there's no human element. But then there was the whole situation here in the States where ChatGPT told the kid how to kill himself. And I'm like, well, we should have thought of this, when we made AI, but we didn't think people were going to start doing something dumb, with TikTok is easily influencing everybody to do something stupid these days. It's scary how easily some of these guys are influenced to do these things. And it's
Yeah.
like, it's scary, really is. The internet scares me at times because like the things that people put out there, and it's like how fast people agree to this. Like there's several different videos I've seen recently. One where the girl was talking about her husband took his life and then acted like she had no remorse. And then these people in the comments are cheering this on. I'm like, no, this is the kind of behavior we need to stop. Like the whole thing about men's mental health videos where they weren't doing those things where the people are insulting. It's like, guys, like the whole idea is we're trying to raise awareness to these subjects in general. Even the suicide awareness videos don't get a lot of attention. Those get kicked off really quick too, because it's such a tough subject for people to understand. And it's to me, it's just weird. It's like, it's the internet. I'm trying to inform people of things. Why can't I inform them? But, all these half naked girls are still on there, but that's okay. We like that because that brings us a lot of revenue. But the fact I'm talking about somebody else in a serious situation, oh my God, well, that video gets clout. One doesn't get any views hardly because it pushes it down and pushes those other ones up. And it's the algorithm's all completely over the
Oh,
place.
yeah, absolutely. And it's, yeah, at the end of the day, when we look at this, when you have a mind that is fragile or
Hmm.
vulnerable, the influence that happens around that is it's catastrophic at times. And we've got to be so careful what people are exposed to and what they see, without the right kind of understanding behind it. We're so easily misled and we're so easily pulled into something
Hmm.
that before it's too late, that there's not much room for change. And I think we're in a state at the moment in which the minds are so addicted to a lot of these. And that, having lectured at colleges, and last year I was at a college just in the south of England,
Yeah.
and it was something that I saw in such an abhorrent state was how attached the minds were to one, their phones, two, social media, and three, ChatGPT, and how the control behind that, it wasn't being utilized as phenomenal tools as they can
Hmm.
be. I don't want to sit here and villainize anything in that regard because there is some brilliant aspects to this, but
Yeah, of course.
when it's led by a vulnerable mind in a state that's looking for something, some kind of solidarity or a fixed point in which they can have grounding within themselves, it's so easy that that can be pulled into a direction that's more dangerous than good for them.
Yeah, no, I agree. Listen, let me ask you though, these videos, have you seen these videos where people put like, okay, so the setup is that they're talking about after you take your life, like after you take your life, your text messages will go. So like they list these things, okay, Liam. And to me, my personal opinion is that these are not effective at all. This is if you're telling this to somebody who's in that state of mind, who's ready to just has a plan, you're basically giving them more reason why they should just do it. Because at that point, you're telling them, okay, no matter what, it doesn't matter. Your life's going to still go on, even though you're not there. And I think that's the real scary message that's happening from these videos.
Yeah.
And maybe I'm just controversial about it, but that to me, someone who's been in that state of mind could tell you that I'm not listening to half that shit. And one of those things on the list could be one of the triggers that are causing me to be in this state of mind. I feel this way, and I feel like they're counterproductive. But you see everybody doing them because of this whole stupid clickbait thing. Well, I get paid for views, and I'm just like, yeah, but think about what you're doing here. You don't realize you're triggering people that don't care about anything else at this moment. They've already made their mind up. They don't care, but they see that. That could be the final thing that tells them go for it because you're basically saying life goes on without them. So, hey, it doesn't matter what you do anyways. No one's going to miss you. You're feeding into what they want to think.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, when we look at it from that perspective, one of the big contributors is that is worthlessness.
Mm-hmm.
And people are often at the point in which they want to take their own life. When it transitions from passive ideation to active ideation, a big contributor to that is the world would be better off without me. The world, people would be happier if I wasn't around. So, when you advocate the idea, well, not advocate, but when you promote the idea that this will all go, that is feeding into a lot of their own narrative of, well, okay, that's easy. Then I'll go down that road. And trying to change somebody's mind when it's from passive to active ideation is very difficult because once somebody has decided they want to take their own life, there's little that can be done oftentimes
Yeah.
unless there's physical intervention, obviously. But at that point, it's trying to work with the decline of mental health with somebody when it is in its passive state to bring back into showing that there is some hopefulness, because the more it slips into hopelessness and this behavior state around seeing the world as a better place without them, the moment that slips from passive to active ideation, then it becomes a really difficult thing to pull back.
Yeah, and that's my biggest fear is these videos floating around, and then it's like all the warning signs. There is no warning signs. A lot of times, you don't know what people are thinking. If you're really closely paying attention, sometimes you won't even know. Most people are happy the day before, and you'll have no idea what happens that they even thought about these things, and it doesn't matter status wise either, as we've seen. All the different people have taken their life. The kid that played for the Dallas Cowboys here in the state was a big one for me. It was just like, really, so what are we doing about this now? So, it's like, okay, it's great. He was 24, okay, and then his girlfriend cites that he had problems. Okay, so what were you doing to help him then? He had lost his mom a year before. So you already know if he was already in a bad state of mind then, losing mom had to really hurt him then.
Yeah.
So what more did we do? And it's like, then all of a sudden everybody got real quiet about it all of a sudden. As soon as this conversation came up, as usual, it gets lost in translation because you don't hear anything else about it, like what they're doing about these things. And this isn't the first time they've had issues like that. It was the concussion thing where Junior Seau went crazy, and killed himself. And it's just like, they all want to wait for something to happen. Then when it happens, oh God, we didn't know it was happening. And then
Yeah.
it's like, then they stop talking about it. And that's the problem. That stop talking about it part just shows that, this young man took his life. And then what are we doing about it? Absolutely nothing. Like we stopped talking about the conversation instead of worrying about these guys as athletes, being put on these high
Mhm.
pedestals, not having a life. Same thing with movie stars. Think about Robin Williams.
Yeah.
He was big. Chris Farley struggled too. It's like, and Chris was struggling to fit in, and what a lot of people are saying. And Robin, what he dealt with on a daily basis, dear God, man, that poor guy is just, what I mean? It's just insane. And it's
Yeah.
like all these things keep happening, but nobody wants to talk about the subject. Do you have any thoughts on why that might be? Is it just because it's really that sensitive a subject?
Yeah, well, I think when we look at the concepts of suicidality and we look at somebody taking their life and the expectations that are on the individual and others around them, it's one of those really difficult spaces where
Yeah.
get much done within that world is incredibly hard because as you mentioned there, people are aware of it after it's happened. That's when all of a sudden the things and the signs start to come into view. It's like, oh yes, I noticed now. Yeah, now I can see it. It all makes sense. You
Yeah.
see the same with breakups. A relationship makes sense as to its decline when it's over, but leading up to that, there's still hope. The difference is when we look at the level of hopelessness that leads to somebody taking their own life, you have to have so much level of vulnerability and authenticity in their explanation of how much they're struggling to be able to make to propagate any depth of change. But
Yeah.
most people will not get to the point where they'll express that much. And the reason why is because they've been hurt before. There are defense mechanisms that aren't allowing them to express that much and that level of depth. I've spoken to patients who have very clearly said quite that they want to kill themselves. They're at a point in their life where they don't want to live anymore. And it's again, what do you do from that point? Because ultimately you can't, unless you're going to get them sectioned and unless they're going to go into a facility and they can't be monitored 24/7 in their day-to-day
Hmm.
life. So
Yeah.
then you
No, I
have
agree.
to, yeah, there has to be a level of hope that they won't do that. But then this is another thing. Then does that become something that everyone else around them then has to take on? And then how much again, we look at a good example here would be in the military and back in the earlier days that I was in the forces. We were coming back from Afghanistan, and PTSD was really kind of taking a spotlight at that point. I think this point was about 2011, 2012. I remember King's College London were running studies on PTSD, and they brought a group
Yeah.
in to sort of do some like have some chats with us. We just got
Hmm.
back. And it was a very prominent subject of, oh, you could be exhibiting signs. And with PTSD, you have to wait about 6 months after an incident, obviously, to then make it diagnosable because it has to be a relative period of time to see that the trauma is actually set within the psyche. And this isn't just struggling to adapt to change. This is a genuine traumatic experience that's exhibiting what would be called the DSM's distinguishing features of PTSD. But so we were quite fresh off the back of the tour to sort of express this, and they were like, well, come back and do the second set of tests, which would have been in the 6 month period to see what's actually going on.
Yeah.
But for everybody involved in that, it was like, well, if we do that, then we're going to be blacklisted and we won't be able to do any more deployments. We won't be able to function. That's us done. That's the career kind of down the pan if we come up as struggling. If we
Yeah.
are a struggling soldier, we're not going to be able to do our job. So then you push it down and it gets suppressed and you carry on and you just get on with things until it resurfaces at some point in life in a far more abhorrent way, which I've noticed is more and more with suicide. This is why suicide is such a high thing within the veteran community
Hmm.
so much that's been pushed down here and not been looked at. But to express the full vulnerability of one's struggle is to show that a level of something that they've been taught not to show. So you're having to work against the defense mechanisms that you've built up. We brandish a lot of this stuff as resilience. We brandish a lot of this as inner strength, when in actual fact, it's a prison.
Hmm.
We don't allow ourselves to fully experience all the parts of us. And when I say this is something I work quite a lot with, which is parts work. I'm working with these sub-personalities that exist through our experiences. When we have a defense mechanism that is so strong in its defense of our wounds, it's not going to let you express the wound enough for it to actually be treated. And then in that sense, that wound is something that will lead to the hopelessness that then leads to suicidality.
Right. Yeah. 50% is what they're saying right now. Some of the numbers I'm looking at now, 50 in every 100,000, breaks down to about 17 to 24 per day, and about 2 to 3 times. They're more 2 to 3 times more likely than people without. But you being a military man yourself, did you see active combat at any point?
I did, yeah, Afghanistan, 2011.
And I think what people need to realize is that, like, everybody wants to say war, 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 but they don't realize what it is that people have to go experience these things are like. Think of the Chris Kyle situation. How they made the movie about him and everything that Chris went through, and how bad Chris struggled. It's like these are what these guys deal with every single day, man. It's like Chris didn't want to be a hero though, and if you watch the movie. I don't know how true it was to his actual story, but I just know that Chris was always saying that though in the movie. He's like, I'm not trying to be a hero. I'm not proud of what I'm doing. I'm trying to do what I need to be, what I'm told to do. That's it. And he was telling the guy in the end of the movie, and things like that too. So, it's crazy though, because I've talked to several veterans that have come back over here in the stateside. And one of them told me that they did a psychiatric test when he came back. And just what you just said was like, instead of them having to hide it, they were just saying, okay, well, nothing's wrong with him. He's fine. So they could send him back out there instead of the fact that he knew something was wrong. This individual told me that he knew that something was wrong. He told them there's something wrong, but he had a TMI and everything else. And like, for him going to the store to get anything and coming back, that's it. That's mentally draining for him. And people don't understand that. Everybody's always like war hungry, but it's not them that's going over there. It's these other people. Think of all the people from Vietnam, and World War II and all them other people that got mustard gassed and all that other crazy stuff that was going on. And people are just like, oh yeah, this is so great. It's so great because you're not the one having to experience this.
Yeah.
And you don't have to deal with the after effects that these guys are having to deal with and the triggers that they go through when they start freaking out, when they start certain sounds or certain smell, even smells can trigger them.
Of
Like I
course, yeah.
had a PTSD moment in the time I was off, and let me tell you, it was the worst feeling ever. I cannot even imagine what these guys deal with on a daily basis. That's just, and it's wild because people are all like war hungry, but at the same time, they don't think about you guys, like what it does to you guys' psyche, because you're the ones that are having to be over the front lines watching these kind of things happening.
I think,
You know, think like
again,
think like Full Metal Jacket, since you mentioned movies, think Full Metal Jacket. That was a crazy one too. You know what I'm saying? Like that kind of shit. What happened with Gomer Pyle at the end, in the beginning of the training sequence, when he ended up killing himself at the end. It's like that's the kind of thing I'm talking about, man. It's like this poor guy, he was struggling, and then the sergeant was doing exactly what he's supposed to do, what he was trained to do, and then the poor guy couldn't handle it anymore. It just ended up sending him off the deep end, and that's unfortunately what happens to a lot of military guys is that they come back and then they're struggling so bad, and it's then like we're just like, okay, whatever, we don't care, we discard them like they're, oh, it doesn't matter, it's okay, it's not okay because you sent them over there and did this to them.
that's it. And what lacks within a lot of this is the training to transition out of that environment.
And the empathy too.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, to be trained to do a specific. So I was in the infantry, so the prime
Hmm.
focus of the job we were doing was, and in its description was to close with and kill the enemies. Is the pretty much the job title.
Yeah.
But they don't train you to come back and be, a member of society. They don't go, right now. You've gone through this lengthy process to do a
Hmm.
specific thing. Here is a way to adapt back into society in a way that you can function without limitations. I think everyone that I have met that has experienced something to that degree has limitations within their ability to function, quote unquote, normally. And a big part of that would be things like hypervigilance. We're in a position where we can utilize a lot of these skills, and this is why people become paramedics or where you're EMTs or police, and lots of different areas that they can go into to utilize these skill sets. But ultimately, that still doesn't treat the deeper wound that exists there.
I would say that being an EMT would be even worse so, given the fact that what they see on a daily basis and so much and so fast, like all the trauma and stuff they see, like some days are okay and other days are worse. I would figure that would heighten their PTSD more if they even had it. If they didn't know they had it, they're going to sure as well figure that out real quick from one of those incidents. They're going to trigger something, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, but what it is, it's the adaptation. Like when you adapt to something. So,
Hmm.
for instance, I've got a few friends that are paramedics now, and and they're doing great. But how they've adapted to doing that is, it was an easier transition to stay in that higher state of hyperarousal, where
Okay.
they operate in that state. But the moment that they stop doing that, that's when they're going to have this depletion, and it's going to that's going to be the struggle. And this is where the transition for a lot of people really, really do struggle from that state. So I think when you transition into something that is of the same, if not a more heightened state of hypervigilance that can continue to produce that same amount of hyperarousal for them, it works okay. But there will come a point where that will stop, and then they're going to
Yeah.
suffer the consequences of that. And again, I appreciate it's not going to be the case for everyone.
No, no, I get
You're going
that.
to have the bell curve, and you're going to have people that are outside of that. But there is a big proportion of those that will find the points in which they are struggling, whether it is in the downtime, whether it is in connecting. Communication's a big one. A lot of things, a lot of people things I hear about veterans and people transitioning is the connection with loved ones, breakdowns in marriages, breakdowns in friendships, because their ability to communicate changes so much because the degree in which the two worlds are so abstractly
Yeah.
different that creates a real conflict in transition.
Do you have any tips for anybody that might run into that problem? Anything you because you're a military guy, maybe you could explain it to someone, give them some idea of how to better relate to these people. If they start having that communication trouble with them, maybe something they could use as a takeaway.
Yeah, it comes back to navigating yourself. And when you sit down with yourself and you look at how you communicate to yourself, recognizing how that is then communicated to other people is key. We work from parts. So when
Mhm.
my level of, and I can do this, I can become so denigrating to myself, and that level of self talk can be so harsh
Mhm.
because there was a time within the military and in childhood, which, childhood that was difficult was then propagated by difficult experiences in the military. It worked because it suited my transition from a rough childhood into a
Yeah.
rough teenage and adult years in the military. But that I continued that same level of denigrating self narrative of being really hard on myself, being unforgiving, being real, the language I'd use against myself was such a put down. But in a
Yeah.
military environment, it was something that, to be treated and talked to like you're scum almost, to really take away your self-worth, but then pound it back in with a level of pride from a different angle. It really plays into the different parts that you have. And I think when you've transitioned out, recognizing what the dialogue is like internally is really important, because I remember some once said to me I was considering leaving like halfway through, I think it was like 2013, 2014. And he said, "Hey, do you want to take the cape off?" And I thought, that's a strange thing to say. And I was like, why? And he's like, well, you do that, you're just going to be the same as everybody else out there. At least by doing this, you have a sense of something different. And he had a good point, because the moment I was out, and granted, I was medically retired at that point, I just felt that anything I had that was strong about my sense of self and my character had then disappeared. And
Yeah.
then there was just this loss. And because I had that, then the narrative I was using internally was always comparative to the person I used to be. This tough army guy, and now I was just this broken veteran, and that couldn't fit in, and it become a language. Well, I just don't fit in with this lot because I'm not a civvy, as we say over here. I'm not a
Mhm.
civilian. I'm a veteran, or I'm a soldier, and that creates such a difference, that the difference between that becomes damaging to the psyche in a way that it then can't relate and it can't connect. And if it can't connect, it can't soothe, because ultimately, if there's no self-regulation for the individual, then there's certainly no co-regulation either, because the ability to connect until you get back in groups with the
Right.
other people, other veterans. And so you spend one night, and I did a veterans retreat actually in South Carolina a few years back, which was fantastic. And again, immediately everyone starts to become a little bit more open, and conversation becomes stronger, and people share, and then emotions get felt for the first time. But that's not enough. One veteran retreat in 5 years isn't going to save someone from killing themselves.
Yeah. No, I agree. No, I agree 100%. I think it's that openness. And I would think maybe it's because people, when they share their thoughts, a lot of people aren't ready to handle those thoughts, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that's the part that scares them the most is that most people in crisis situations freak out. Like them talking to you is actually a lot more effective than most people realize. It's just you have to listen. That's I think it's the problem too, is other people don't realize it's like you have to actively listen, you know? I met a guest though. She had told me that whole scenario of, like, hey, Liam, if you need something, ever call me and the kind of thing. If I were to tell you to call me and I answered your call and did what this person did to her, basically disregarded everything. She's like, "Hey, I'm in a situation. I need you. I'm calling you for this reason." And they just kind of pushed her to the side. It was to me, it was just like that. You can't do that. Like that's you have to understand when you tell somebody that if they get in that situation, understand if they're calling you for that, you need to stop and listen. Like you need to be prepared for these kind of things. Don't offer that if you're not ready to follow through with that because it's detrimental to that person. Because for all you know, that could be the last thing they hear before they
Mhm.
decide to make this choice. They're coming to talk to you, which is good because you want them to talk to you. Now, if you get in a crisis situation, 988 is there for that reason. Call them and get them on the phone and let them know these guys are trained to handle it. Will your friend be mad at you? It's a possibility. Let them be mad at you, but they put you in a situation that you were worried and you're worried about their safety. Like, worry about the aftermath later, man. You got to protect these people.
Absolutely, absolutely. And again, it's key how we communicate. It's absolutely key. It can be so damaging. Saying the wrong thing at the wrong time can be really dismantling to somebody who's really trying to hold on.
Hmm. No, I agree. I agree 100%. So, Liam, let me ask you about your new book coming up. I know we talked about it a little bit. I know it's been delayed. So, why don't you tell us a little bit about what the upcoming book's going to be about?
Yeah, so it's been something I've been working on for a long time in regards to really trying to put my own experiences. So there's a big level of self-analysis within this and understanding what I've called divisional self. So when we're
Hmm.
working with ourselves and the structure of ourselves, we fracture the psyche with wounds, and we have core wounds. So everybody has them. And the degree in which we have experienced our wounds are very different for everybody, but we experience a wound which then creates a defense mechanism, and what happens with the defense mechanism over time is it becomes disengaging from the world that we live in. So we have to construct masks. And we are people that we all wear masks. There is
Hmm.
always a level of inauthenticity with everybody. We are
Yep.
very rarely fully authentic. And whether or not we can actually achieve full authenticity, I don't know if we can, but you know, even to ourselves. And I think with that, recognizing the masks that exist to cover the defense mechanisms which are housing these wounds. It's almost a performance. And the way it's sort of worded and looked at in the book is we exist in this masked performance of life and we connect with people and we disconnect and we reconnect with different things in our life. For the technical terms, we're looking at object relations. And within object relations, we're looking at our ourselves, the parts of ourselves that connect. So you imagine all the experience that you've had. And what I've done with the writing of this book is
Hmm.
recognizing the significant experiences that I've had over the time of my life and the parts of me that have been created through this and how these parts work in conjunction with one another and the tension between these parts and the marks that get created in response to that. So even the person that's chatting to you today, has had a day of experiences and a lifetime of experiences that are either permeating through a mask or that are being hidden, and there's reasons for that. And sometimes there can be cracks that a conversation can allow for that part
Hmm.
to express and connect. Sometimes it won't, and sometimes it can disconnect. And I think recognizing how we can navigate these parts in an internal landscape to better connect with people, because it's not about getting rid of the parts of us that we dislike. It's
Yeah.
not about looking at the parts of us that we'd rather not have and ignoring them or suppressing them. It's about working in conjunction with the tension that they create and really trying to create a life out of that as well.
I think you're right, though. The conversation part of that last part where you mentioned the cracks, I've had people like that before. We've had conversations, and then all of a sudden they start going into things they had no intention of even sharing at the process and the time period. They're just like, okay, they start warming up to me a little bit. A few of them have. You've seen a couple of them. I was in one episode, one woman, she took about 15 minutes in, she started warming up, and you could see her mood change a bit, and then she started talking about way more things than she intended to, And I had a friend I've known for a while now. I didn't know the other half of the story until we got to a part of the conversation. She made a comment, and I dug into the comment a little bit, and then she's like, "Well, I wasn't going to plan on telling you, but then started telling us things that made Breaking Bad look like a children's TV series. Like this is like the things that people tell me. So it's great." because that's why I keep it conversational versus like, sitting here hammering questions home for people because the conversation seems to go better for most people. If people get comfortable and then they start telling you things, and a lot of people will tell you things that they didn't even intended to say. They're like, "Oh, well, I never meant to tell you." But when I did an astrological star reading, I actually did one episode when I was doing them live. We did one. She said that that was one of the characteristics I had, which made a lot of sense for a lot reason why a lot of people would come up to me and just say, tell me things they never tell people. Like, well, I never told anybody this, but let me tell you something. It's always how they started. Like, let me tell you, I'm like, okay, here we go. This is gonna get juicy. Here we are. And then they get into these things, and then I take it and I don't say anything about most of them. Only ones I'm allowed to share is the ones I share. Other than that, I'm very secrecy when it comes to that. So when people tell me
Yeah.
things, a lot of my conversations are very private. I don't tell people a lot of stuff. I don't, really talk about those things. But that's the level of but with me being on the internet though, like I'm fairly open about a lot of things and some things I've revealed recently too, I never told people about. And it's just like little by little at this point, it's like it's hard not to mask it because when you tell people their instant reactions like, what was that? Excuse me? Huh? What?
Yeah.
And they like, well, I never knew. Those are all the things you do, and the negative self-talk that I think is great because me and another neuroscientist, we were talking about how the hierarchy system in men versus how women make everyone feel together kind of thing like that. We had that whole conversation of that part. But I think negative self-talk is really an interesting one because a lot of us we are our own harshest critic though. Think about it. You're harder on yourself than you're harder on most people because you want to hold yourself accountable to these things. People that are trying to change hold themselves more accountable for things and don't beat themselves up because hey, listen, I made a mistake. But it's the same thing like with addiction. They're gonna slip up. It's gonna happen. It happens. You know what? Just how you will go about it is really what the next step of it is. Don't sit there and degrade them because they made a mistake. Okay, give them a little help. Like, all right, hey, you fucked up. Okay, but we're not gonna sit here and dwell on it the whole time. Listen, you fucked up. I'm a little hurt that you did. They don't need to hear all that. They don't want to hear it. You know what I'm saying? You don't want to guilt these people because they made a mistake. They know they made a mistake. Trust me, that person's beating themselves up worse. And there's a young guy I'm thinking of that we met recently a few days ago that he was doing the same thing, he was beating himself up. And I didn't kind of like the whole conversation how they were like beating him up. My thing was he just kept making excuses. And I said, hey man, listen, I'm going to call you out when you make an excuse. I'm not trying to upset you. I'm just trying to make you understand that you need to stop making excuses, man. Just take responsibility for what you did. That's it. You're in discussion. And these other people were just like chiming in with, well, you're disappointed me. I'm thinking he doesn't need to hear that shit. He's already beating himself up about this already. He doesn't need your help to continue to drive himself down there even further.
No.
And things like that too. So I love when you mention negative self-talk because I don't think a lot of people talk about that honestly. I
Yeah.
think that it's that thought process that the harshest critic thing is always what comes back to it, but at the same time it's like you got to give yourself a little leeway too because people make mistakes. You're going to make mistakes. You're human. Nobody's perfect. When everyone says they're perfect, then that's obviously to discredit them instantly because you're not. I mean, let's be
Yeah.
honest. Nobody is.
No, not at all. Not even close.
Right. So, Liam, I'm going to switch up the conversation as we get ready to wrap up here. Okay, man. I'm going to ask you two questions. Okay. And these are the same questions I've asked everybody. You're going to like this first one. I'm guaranteeing it. Okay. So, my question to you is that if your mental health had a song, what would that song be? And you're an artist, guy. So, this will be an interesting one.
That's a good question. I like that. If my mental health was a song, I would actually say "If I'm Going, I'm Gone" by Gregory Alan Isakoff,
Okay.
one of my favorite artists. And I think, yeah, I think that's one that's resonated so deeply with me.
That's the thing. Music resonates with all of us, man. Think about that one song that always gets you through that bad mood, and it could be anything. And I always get interesting responses to that question all the time because it's just so interesting to see what people say. And usually the other thing I ask people too, I'm like, hey, listen, what's your top 5 bands? And they'll look at me and go, why? I'm like, because I'm harshly judging on every single one that you're about to say. So, it's always a fun opener. It's always a fun question to ask. I got that from a friend of mine. She runs a podcast, the shit that goes on in her head. She came out and asked me the same question. So mine, I broke it down differently. I said that whatever that intro song to Scott Pilgrim versus the World, that's my anxiety. That constant fluttering state of that constant, like punk rock kind of like unlimited sound. And then I said my depression one would be Leave the Light On, Tuck Away the Dark by Papa Roach would be it, or what is it? A Different Kind of Pain by Cold would be another one. It kind of fits in that because it's just so
Yeah,
so soft as it goes, kind of thing, and stuff like that as well. So I love it when I get people's responses to it. We've had some pretty wild ass responses on it. I'm going to
I
tell you
bet.
that was fun. We had some fun ones too. People were like, "Well, damn, that's a good question. How would I break that down?" So
Absolutely.
Liam, the next question and the most important reason why we're even having this conversation is that if you could break the stigma about mental health, now I say this in the aspects of something you hear people that they believe every single day that you just want to debunk and be like, hey guys, let's stop believing this. What would you say that one thing would be?
I think for me, a big thing is around suffering. I think it's recognizing that the pain from suffering isn't something that needs to be paralyzing and stop us. It's something that can really move us. It's something that is kinetic. It can create action. If we recognize the pain in that which we feel and the suffering behind that, we can transform that into something that can create growth, not limit growth. And I think a lot of the times we stop, we live to avoid the pain that we're feeling, and we look for things to avoid it, but actually recognizing what is causing this, actually sitting with that and experiencing it to its truest core can allow us to move through it in a way that becomes so much healthier. And I think the stigma around actually just working with the pain that we feel and the suffering we feel, we look for resilience and we look for these inner strengths to get through things. But I think it's utilizing the suffering that we have can
Mhm.
become one of the strongest tactics and tools that we have.
And with that being said, really quick before I start signing off here, I do want to point that out to you, though. I've been doing the same thing. I actually applied that principle myself. I turned my trauma into my superpower because
Mm.
I was abandoned when I was 10. So now I have this thing where I make everybody feel more welcome. And
Yeah.
it's my
Right.
superpower because if it wasn't for that, then this podcast wouldn't even exist. Instead of sitting there blaming myself or blaming the individual for what happened, it's more like I'm going to thank them and they're not going to know what it's for, and it's more for myself because I'm turning this into a superpower because this show exists because of my trauma. That's the reason why I started. I wanted people to feel included. I wanted this conversation to be put out front and have an actual conversation, not me sit here and give off some kind of random rhetoric the whole time. But that's why I invite great people like you to come on to talk to me. So, Liam, with that being said, where can everybody find you? Like, do you want to plug your website? Where do you want them to go? That'd be the best way to reach out to you.
Yeah, so I've got a website with www.liamjwakefield.com, and I'm on all the social medias, mostly Instagram. I say on all of them. I'm not the most active person, but that's because I sit in a chair in a private practice 10 hours a day working with
Yeah.
people.
He's like, I'm tired of people.
But this year is going to be a bigger push for more of the social media side of things and actually being out there more. It's great to be able to work face to face with people, but wanting a wider reach requires, the time and effort. As I'm sure you're aware, running a podcast is it's not an easy thing.
I also have two here coming January 5th. I have another project I'm working on as well. So, and this is by the time this release comes out anyways, everybody already know it comes out in February though. But yeah, no, definitely I get that. The social media aspect is a little tougher, but now if I've discovered certain things that have helped me spread my message out faster, so I don't really have to do much. I put the work in ahead of time to get it there. And then, now that it's there, I just kind of just let it do its own thing. Like I have a schedule that drops everything for me. And instead of paying
Fantastic.
all these hundreds of dollars these people want you to do, I really don't pay much for it at all. It's
Mhm.
actually something a friend suggested. So, well, with that being said, Liam, I'm going to wrap up this episode, man. Thank you so much for
Wonderful.
being here, bro. I enjoyed this
Wow.
conversation. Liam's going to keep me posted, though, on when the book's coming out, guys. So, if this recording comes out before the book comes out, I'll definitely update you on when it comes out. And that way we can get it attached to this, episode for y'all to listen to. So, but Liam, thank you so much for coming, man. I appreciate hanging out
Yeah,
with me. This is
thank
a
you very
great
much.
time. Guys, and with that being said, we're going to wrap up this episode of Pete vs. Anxiety. You guys know where to find me. I'm Pete vs. Anxiety. I'm on Spotify. Oh, and on iHeartRadio. I'm on Pandora as well, too. My bad. I keep forgetting that part. Sorry. I'm on X all the way down to TikTok, guys. And as I always say, it costs nothing, absolutely nothing kind to somebody. One kind act you could do could save someone's life, or hell, you can make their day. I'm Pete for Anxiety signing off saying, don't ask how your day is today. Say, hey, how's your mental health?